Hello, Lolo. I'm live. Sorry, to pull my blouse into the right thing. What a day. What a day it has been. I mean, I didn't actually do that much, but went to the doctor and hopefully got a recommendation for a referral to a new psychiatrist. Hopefully. Fingers crossed. This camera's really bugging me. There must be settings somewhere so I can do something with it, but never mind. The important thing is that the computer works, that you can see and hear me. Although I guess the important thing is that you can hear me. Can you hear me? Yeah, probably. Otherwise you guys would have said something. Okay, so we are up to chapter 24 of Villette. In chapter 23, Vashti, Lucy goes to a play. She sees a famous actress of the day. Hello, the Cabal. Very nice to meet you, and thank you for, well, nice to see you here, and thank you for saying that you can hear me. I'm very grateful. So Lucy and Dr. John went to see a play together, and a famous actress of the day was playing, and Lucy was spellbound by her. She thought she was magnificent, like a prince of hell, and Dr. John didn't. Then there was a fire. That was pretty exciting. And a little girl got trampled, or a young girl. She said that she is 17 years of age. And she is a total pain in the ass. So, Dr. John looks after the wee girl who got trampled. And then after all that excitement, Lucy goes home. No, Ginevra was not actually at the play, but she is always in Lucy's thoughts. So we didn't get any new snowshore moments. But onward and upward. Now, I just want to... Oh, okay. Well, you're going to need a way longer recap, but basically, Lucy Snow is teaching English in a town called Villette in France. Lucy is a very, very reserved person who thinks she has a crush on Dr. John, an Englishman, also sometimes known as Graham. But she actually has a crush on Monsieur Paul, the cousin of the headmistress of the school where she works and sleeps. But actually, she has a crush on a pupil. They're about the same age, called Ginevra Fanshawe, which, we can only see because this is the 21st century. Don't know if Charlotte Bronte did it intentionally, but they are super in love. Hi, Josh. Welcome. Hello. Sorry about the quality of the webcam, but it works, and that's the main thing. I'm extremely grateful for it working. Okay. Should I start? No, we're only 4 minutes in. What else can I tell you about Villette? Dr. John used to be in love with Ginevra Fanshawe, or thought he was. And then he figured out she was probably sleeping with her other boyfriend, the Count d'Amal, who Lucy doesn't think much of. She thinks he looks like a little doll of a man, which makes me think of Ben Shapiro, which is very funny. And also Ginevra Fanshawe gave Dr. John's mother a sort of giggling look at the opera. And he was like, my love for her is dead. It's dead and gone. Oh, yeah. No, Dr. John's not a brooding hunk. He's a sunshine boy. Nothing bad seems to ever really touch him. Monsieur Paul is a little son of a bitch who finds fault with everybody and loves the power that he has in the school, and he is kind of merciless with Lucy, but she teases him back. And they genuinely hurt each other's feelings. I don't think it's particularly healthy. And Ginevra Fanshawe, well, Ginevra is beautiful and vain and silly, and Lucy does not approve of her in any way, but also they're totally in love. It's not even subtext at this point. Like, yeah, this is the gayest Bronte book. Villette, Charlotte Bronte. The real Charlotte Bronte did teach in France, much the same situation. And she did have a crush on a guy. Sounds pretty similar to Dr. John. And then she had a crush on a guy who seemed pretty similar to Monsieur Paul. And that did not end very well for her. That's my basic overview based on a book I read about 15 years ago. So don't believe anything I say, pretty much. Okay. We'll crack on, I think. Monsieur de Bassompierre, chapter 24. Those who live in retirement, whose lives have fallen amid the seclusion of schools or other walled-in and guarded dwellings, are liable to be suddenly and for a long while dropped out of the memory of their friends, the denizens of a freer world. Unaccountably, perhaps, and close upon some space of unusually frequent intercourse, some congeries of rather exciting little circumstances, whose natural sequel would rather seem to be the quickening than the suspension of communication. There falls a stilly pause, a wordless silence, a long blank of oblivion. Unbroken always is this blank, alike entire and unexplained. The letter, the message, once frequent, are cut off, and the visit, formerly periodical, ceases to occur. The book, paper, or other token that indicated remembrance comes no more. Frequent intercourse. Lucy could do with some infrequent intercourse, if I'm being completely honest. Sorry, it's warm, and then it's cold, and then it's warm again. I don't know. Always there are excellent reasons for these lapses, if the hermit but knew them. Though he is stagnant in his cell, his connections without are whirling in the very vortex of life. That void interval which passes for him so slowly that the very clocks seem at a stand, and the wingless hours plod by in the likeness of tired tramps prone to rest at milestones. That same interval, perhaps, teems with events and pants with hurry for his friends. Yeah, it's total lockdown vibes. Really, yeah. Lucy is essentially in lockdown. Yeah, I thought I would check to see if it was stained or not first, but you can't tell. It's one of the great things about the camera. The hermit, if he be a sensible hermit, will swallow his own thoughts and lock up his own emotions during these weeks of inward winter. he will know that destiny designed him to imitate, on occasion, the dormouse, and that he will be conformable, make a tidy ball of himself, creep into a hole of life's a wall, and submit decently to the drift which blows in and soon blocks him up, preserving him in ice for the season. Very locked down. Let him say, "It is quite right. It ought to be so, since so it is." And perhaps one day his snow sepulchre will open, spring softness will return, the sun and south wind will reach him, the budding of hedges and caroling of birds and singing of liberated streams will call him to kindly resurrection. Perhaps this may be the case, perhaps not. The frost may get into his heart and never thaw more. When spring comes, a crow or a pie may pick out of the wall only his dormouse bones. Well, even in that case, all will be right. It is to be supposed he knew from the first he was mortal, and must one day go the way of all flesh, as well soon as sign. Just as well today as later on. I love Lucy's just relentless pessimism. You know, sometimes we really should be like a dormouse, just curl up, and the summer will surely come. Although not if the dormouse dies and a bird comes around and just pulls out his dormouse bones. Because that also happens a lot. Lucy is just relentlessly unkind to herself and us. Yeah. She's very relatable. She's very millennial. Millennials are like us, right? They're like in their 30s. Or however old I am, I can't remember. Following that fateful evening at the theatre, remember when they met the young girl who got trampled and Dr. John looked after her and so on, came for me 7 weeks as bare as 7 sheets of blank paper. No word was written on one of them. Not a visit, not a token. Yeah, 30s, yeah. Dr. John has not been visiting Lucy or writing to her as he said he would. You know, hence the dormouse. About the middle of that time, I entertained fancies that something had happened to my friends at La Terrasse, Dr. Bretton's house. The mid-blank is always a beclouded point for the solitary. His nerves ache with the strain of long expectancy. The doubts hitherto repelled gather now to a mass and, strong in accumulation, roll back upon him with a force which savours of vindictiveness. Night, too, becomes an unkindly time, and sleep and his nature cannot agree. Strange starts and struggles harass his couch. The sinister band of bad dreams, with horror of calamity and sick dread of entire desertion at their head, join the league against him. Poor wretch! He does his best to bear up, but he is a poor, pallid, wasting wretch, despite the best. Towards the last of those long 7 weeks, I admitted, what through the other 6 I had jealously excluded, the conviction that these blanks were inevitable, the result of circumstances, the fiat of fate, a part of my life's lot, and, above all, a matter about whose origin no question must ever be asked, for whose painful sequence no murmur ever uttered. Of course, I did not blame myself for suffering. I thank God I had a truer sense of justice than to fall into any imbecile extravagances of self-accusation. And as to blaming others for silence, in my reason I well knew them blameless, and in my heart acknowledged them so. But it was a rough and heavy road to travel, and I longed for better days. I tried different expedients to sustain and fill existence. I commenced an elaborate piece of lacework. I studied German pretty hard. I undertook a course of regular reading of the driest and thickest books in the library. In all my efforts, I was as orthodox as I knew how to be. Was there error somewhere? Very likely. I only know the result was as if I had gnawed a file to satisfy hunger, or drunk brine to quench thirst. I do like the fact that amid all of this, the general tone of Charlotte's writing, I studied German pretty hard. What else could I do to pass the time? I couldn't watch Mad Men. My hour of torment was the post hour. Unfortunately, I knew it too well, and tried as vainly as assiduously to cheat myself of that knowledge, dreading the rack of expectation and the sick collapse of disappointment which daily preceded and followed upon that well-recognized ring. I suppose animals kept in cages, and so scantily fed as to be always upon the verge of famine, await their food as I awaited a letter. Oh, to speak truth, and drop that tone of a false calm, which longs to sustain, outwears nature's endurance. I underwent in those 7 weeks bitter fears and pains, strange inward trials, miserable defections of hope, intolerable encroachments of despair. This last came so near me sometimes that her breath went right through me. I used to feel it, like a baleful air or sigh, penetrate deep and make motion pause at my heart, or proceed only under unspeakable oppression. The letter, the well-beloved letter, would not come, and it was all of sweetness in life I had to look for. Oh, Lucy's a massive nerd. Yeah. The letter is like food to her, and food is like letters to her, and words are like ice cream. I'm just thinking about ice cream. In the very extremity of want, I had recourse again and yet again to the little packet in the case, the 5 letters. These are letters from Dr. John. How splendid that month seemed whose skies had beheld the rising of these 5 stars. It was always at night that I visited them, and not daring to ask every evening for a candle in the kitchen, I bought a wax taper and matches to light it, and at the study hour stole up to the dormitory and feasted on my crust from the Barmecide's loaf. It did not nourish me. I pined on it and got as thin as a shadow. Otherwise, I was not ill. I'm going to have to look up Barmecide's loaf. What on earth? 39. From a story in the Arabian Nights signifying imaginary food and drink. Alphabet soup for the soul. Yeah. I wonder if alphabet soup has like hashtags and @ symbols in it now. Creepy if so. Reading there somewhat late one evening, and feeling that the power to read was leaving me, for the letters from incessant perusal were losing all sap and significance. My gold was withering to leaves before my eyes, and I was sorrowing over the disillusion. Suddenly a quick tripping foot ran up the stairs. I knew Ginevra Fanshaw's step. She had dined in town that afternoon. She was now returned, and would come here to replace her shawl, etc., in the wardrobe. Ginevra. Yes, in she came, dressed in bright silk, with her shawl falling from her shoulders, and her curls, half uncurled in the damp of night, drooping careless and heavy upon her neck. I had hardly time to recasket my treasures and lock them up when she was at my side. Her humour seemed none of the best. It has been a stupid evening. They are stupid people, she began. Who? Mrs. Chumley? I thought you always found her house charming. I have not been to Mrs. Chumley's. Indeed, have you made new acquaintance? My uncle de Bassompierre has come. Your uncle de Bassompierre? Are you not glad? I thought he was a favourite. You thought wrong. The man is odious. I hate him. Because he is a foreigner, or for what other reason of equal weight? He is not a foreigner. The man is English enough, goodness knows, and had an English name till 3 or 4 years ago. But his mother was a foreigner, a de Bassompierre, and some of her family are dead and have left him estates, a title, and this name. He is quite a great man now. Do you hate him for that reason? Don't I know what Mamma says about him? He's not my own uncle, but married Mamma's sister. Mamma detests him. She says he killed Aunt Ginevra with unkindness. He looks like a bear. Such a dismal evening, she went on. I'll go no more to his big hotel. Fancy me walking into a room alone, and a great man 50 years old coming forwards, and after a few minutes' conversation actually turning his back upon me, and then abruptly going out of the room. Such odd ways. I dare say his conscience smote him, for they all say at home I am the picture of Aunt Ginevra. Mamma often declares the likeness is quite ridiculous. Were you the only visitor? The only visitor, yes. And then there was Missy, my cousin. Little spoiled, pampered thing. Monsieur de Bassompierre has a daughter. Yes, yes, don't tease one with questions. Oh dear, I am so tired. She yawned. Throwing herself without ceremony on my bed, she added, my bed. It seems Mademoiselle was nearly crushed to a jelly in a hubbub at the theatre some weeks ago. Ah, indeed. And they live in a large hotel in the Rue Crécy. Justement. How do you know? I have been there. Oh, you have? Really? You go everywhere these days. I suppose Mother Breton took you. Dr. John's mother. She and Esculapius have the entree of the de Bassompierre apartments. It seems my son John attended Missy on the occasion of her accident. Accident? All affectation. I don't think she was squeezed more than she richly deserves for her airs. And now there is quite an intimacy struck up. I heard something about old Lang Syne and what not. Oh, how stupid they all were. Oh, yeah. Lucy hates foreigners. She hates being in France because of all the foreign stuff and the foreign people. All? You said you were the only visitor. Did I? You see, one forgets to particularize an old woman and her boy. This is Ginevra's ex-boyfriend and his mother. Dr. and Mrs. Breton were at Monsieur de Bassompierre's this evening. Aye, large as life, and Missy played the hostess. What a conceited doll it is. Soured and listless, Miss Fanshawe was beginning to disclose the causes of her prostrate condition. There had been a retrenchment of incense, a diversion or total withholding of homage and attention. Coquetry had failed of effect. Vanity had undergone mortification. She lay fuming in the vapours. Ginevra doesn't really care about Dr. John, but she just hates it when her boyfriends stop wanting her. She can't handle it. Is Mr. Bassompierre quite well now? I asked. As well as you or I, no doubt, but she is an affected little thing, and gave herself invalid airs to attract medical notice. And to see the old dowager making her recline on a couch, and my son John prohibiting excitement, etc. The scene was quite sickening. It would not have been so if the object of attention had been changed, if you had taken Miss de Bassompierre's place. Oh, indeed. I hate my son John. My son John? Whom do you indicate by that name? Dr. Breton's mother never calls him so. Then she ought. A clownish, bearish John he is. You violate the truth by saying so, and as the whole of my patience is now spun off the distaff, I peremptorily desire you to rise from that bed and vacate this room. Ooh. Passionate thing. Your face is the colour of a coquelicot. Don't know what that is, but I'm guessing it's red. I wonder what always makes you so mighty testy à l'endroit du gros Jean. John Anderson, my Joe, John. Oh, the distinguished name. What always makes her testy? That was English. When we're talking about John. I said, "Good day, madam." No, it's very much the tone. Everyone else in the school is afraid of Lucy because of it. But what? They know that she's not keen on being BFFs. But Ginevra's never put off by it. Thrilling with exasperation, to which it would have been sheer folly to have given vent. For there was no contending with that unsubstantial feather, that mealy-winged moth. I extinguished my taper, locked my bureau, and left her, since she would not leave me. Small bear as she was, she had turned insufferably acid. Ooh. The morrow was Thursday and a half holiday. Breakfast was over. I had withdrawn to the first class. The dreaded hour, the post hour, was nearing, and I sat waiting for it, much as a ghost seer might wait his spectre. Less than ever was a letter probable. Still, strive as I would, I could not forget that it was possible. As the moments lessened, a restlessness and fear almost beyond the average assailed me. It was a day of winter east wind, and I had now for some time entered into that dreary fellowship with the winds and their changes, so little known, so incomprehensible to the healthy. The north and east owned a terrible influence, making all pain more poignant, all sorrow sadder. The south could calm, the west sometimes cheer, unless indeed they brought on their wings the burden of thunderclouds, under the weight and warmth of which all energy died. Lockdown vibes again. Bitter and dark as was this January day, I remember leaving the class and running down without bonnet to the bottom of the long garden, and there lingering amongst the stripped shrubs, in the forlorn hope that the postman's ring might occur while I was out of hearing, and I might thus be spared the thrill which some particular nerve or nerves, almost gnawed through with the unremitting tooth of a fixed idea, were becoming wholly unfit to support. Having a crush is the worst, literally. It makes you the world's idiot. That's just my commentary. That's not Lucy. I lingered as long as I dared without fear of attracting attention by my absence. I muffled my head in my apron and stopped my ears in terror of the torturing clang, sure to be followed by such blank silence, such barren vacuum for me. At last I ventured to re-enter the first class, where, as it was not yet 9 o'clock, no pupils had been admitted. The first thing seen was a white object on my black desk, a white, flat object. The post had indeed arrived, by me unheard. Rosine had visited my cell, and like some angel had left behind her a bright token of her presence. That shining thing on the desk was indeed a letter, a real letter. I saw so much at the distance of 3 yards, and as I had but one correspondent on earth, from that one it must come. He remembered me yet. How deep a pulse of gratitude sent new life through my heart. Drawing near, bending and looking on the letter, in trembling but almost certain hope of seeing a known hand, it was my lot to find, on the contrary, an autograph for the moment deemed unknown. A pale female scrawl instead of a firm masculine character. I then thought fate was too hard upon me, and I said audibly, This is cruel. So relatable. But I got over that pain also. She's like, no, letter is yucky. Why? Why? I got over that pain also. Life is still life, whatever its pangs. Our eyes and ears and their use remain with us, though the prospect of what pleases be wholly withdrawn, and the sound of what consoles be quite silenced. I opened the billet, letter. I should just say letter. By this time I had recognised its handwriting as perfectly familiar. It was dated La Terrasse, and it ran thus. Dr. Twink has left Lucy on red for like 6 weeks. 7 weeks. A long letter. This is from Mrs. Breton, Dr. John's mama. Dear Lucy, it occurs to me to inquire what you have been doing with yourself for the last month or two. Not that I suspect you would have the least difficulty in giving an account of your proceedings. I dare say you have been just as busy and happy as ourselves at La Terrasse. Oblivious. As to Graham, Dr. John, his mother calls him Graham. It's stupid. As to Graham, his professional connection extends daily. He is so much sought after, so much engaged, that I tell him he will grow quite conceited. Like a right good mother as I am, I do my best to keep him down. No flattery does he get from me, as you know. And yet, Lucy, he is a fine fellow. His mother's heart dances at the sight of him. After being hurried here and there the whole day, and passing the ordeal of 50 sorts of tempers, and combating 100 caprices, and sometimes witnessing cruel sufferings, perhaps occasionally, as I tell him, inflicting them, at night he still comes home to me in such kindly, pleasant mood that really I seem to live in a sort of moral antipodes, and on these January evenings my day rises when other people's night sets in. Humble brags, yeah. She's basically like, Dear Lucy, how have you been? I bet you've been great, just like me. Here's how great I feel daily, all the time. Still, he needs keeping in order, and correcting, and repressing, and I do him that good service. But the boy is so elastic, there is no such thing as vexing him thoroughly. When I think I have at last driven him to the sullens, he turns on me with jokes for retaliation. But you know him and all his iniquities, and I am but an elderly simpleton to make him the subject of this epistle. Yeah, the heart should not dance, ideally. As for me, I have had my old Breton agent here on a visit, and have been plunged over head and ears in business matters. I do so wish to regain for Graham at least some part of what his father left him. He laughs to scorn my anxiety on this point, bidding me look and see how he can provide for himself and me too, and asking what the old lady can possibly want that she has not, hinting about sky blue turbans, accusing me of an ambition to wear diamonds, keep livery servants, have a hotel, and lead the fashion amongst the English clan in Villette. Talking of sky blue turbans, okay, so they were out. He must not be vexed. Indeed, we read Wuthering Heights, and Kathy must not be vexed. I've really taken that on as like a life thing, where people just shouldn't vex me. Okay, so Mrs. Breton, Dr. John, and Lucy were all out at this event thing. And one of them won a sky blue turban with like blue feathers coming off it. And that's basically what the joke is about. The joke is that it's a hat that was fashionable like 20 years before this, I think. Well, it'd be like getting a really weird old dress from the 80s as a gift. Like, with the big lace collar that makes you look like you're a little girl. I think that's kind of it's not because it's a turban, it's because it's an out of style English fashion. Talking of sky blue turbans, I wish you'd been with us the other evening. He had come in really tired, and after I'd given him his tea, he threw himself into my chair with his customary presumption. To my great delight, he dropped asleep. You know how he teases me about being drowsy, I who never, by any chance, close an eye by daylight. While he slept, I thought he looked very bonny, Lucy. Fool as I am to be so proud of him, but who can help it? Show me his peer. Look where I will, I see nothing like him in Villette. Well, I took it into my head to play him a trick. So I brought out the sky blue turban, and handling it and him with gingerly precaution, I managed to invest his brows with this grand adornment. I assure you it did not at all misbecome him. He looked quite Eastern, except that he is so fair. Nobody, however, can accuse him of having red hair now. It is genuine chestnut, a dark, glossy chestnut, and when I put my large cashmere about him, there was as fine a young Bey, Dey, or Pasha improvised as you would wish to see. After Napoleon went to Egypt and stuff, there was a huge craze for this kind of thing in France, England, that kind of area. I have not seen Mystery Men, but I think I can picture what you mean. It was good entertainment, but only half enjoyed, since I was alone. You should have been there. In due time, my lord awoke. The looking glass above the fireplace soon intimated to him his plight. As you may imagine, I now live under threat and dread of vengeance. But to come to the gist of my letter, I know Thursday a half holiday in the Rue Fossette, the school. Be ready then by 5 in the afternoon, at which hour I will send the carriage to take you out to La Terrasse. Be sure to come. You may meet some old acquaintance. Goodbye, my wise, dear, grave little goddaughter. Very truly yours, Louisa Breton. I'll have to watch it then. Mrs. Breton is not afraid of actual physical harm coming to her from John. They just have a very teasing relationship. Yeah, it's not like that at all. Now, a letter like that sets one to rights. I might still be sad after reading that letter, but I was more composed. Not exactly cheered, perhaps, but relieved. My friends, at least, were well and happy. No accident had occurred to Graham. No illness had seized his mother. Calamities that had so long been my dream and thought. Their feelings for me, too, were as they had been. Yet how strange it was to look on Mrs. Breton's 7 weeks and contrast them with my 7 weeks. Also, how very wise it is in people placed in an exceptional position to hold their tongues and not rashly declare how such position galls them. The world can understand well enough the process of perishing for want of food. Perhaps few persons can enter into or follow out of that of going mad from solitary confinement. Don't think that's true today. They see the long-buried prisoner disinterred, a maniac or an idiot, how his senses left him, how his nerves first inflamed, underwent nameless agony, and then sunk to palsy, is a subject too intricate for examination, too abstract for popular comprehension. Speak of it. You might almost as well stand up in a European marketplace and propound dark sayings in that language and mood wherein Nebuchadnezzar, the imperial hypochondriac, communed with his baffled Chaldeans. Nebuchadnezzar was a biblical king who tried to get people to interpret his dreams, and they were like, "We don't want to hear about your dreams, bro." And he was like, "I'm the king, though. so they had to listen to his dreams. It's the only reason anyone wants to be a king. And long, long may the minds to whom such themes are no mystery, by whom their bearings are sympathetically seized, be few in number and rare of recounter. Long may it be generally thought that physical privations alone merit compassion, and that the rest is a figment. When the world was younger and haler than now, moral trials were a deeper mystery still. Perhaps in all the land of Israel there was but one Saul, certainly but one David to soothe or comprehend him. Basically, Lucy's saying, I was like so depressed. No one's ever even been that depressed, and no one really gets it. But on the other hand, I'm really glad that nobody gets it, because then that would be sad. You know? Also fairly relatable. The keen, still cold of the morning was succeeded later in the day by a sharp breathing from Russian wastes. The cold zone sighed over the temperate zone and froze it fast. A heavy firmament, dull and thick with snow, sailed up from the north and settled over expectant Europe. Flora, come on. Do you want some catnip oil? Flora's here. Oh, whoops, I dropped it. Catnipus? Yeah? Nice. Oh, shoot. Oh, there it is. Thick with snow. Come on. Okay. You're gonna... Oh, yeah, you're gonna lick up all the catnip oil. It's so yummy. You gonna let the people see you? No, look, there it is. Num, 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 num. Come on. Just sit on my knee, let the people see you. She hates being content. Okay. She really is here. Oh, you're such a good girl. You're a good girl. There it is. Oh, come here. Hello. Hello. Oh, Florabella. She's sitting just out of frame, but she'll forget and come and sit with me in a bit. Hey. Hey, madam. You want this? There you go. So nice. Towards afternoon, a heavy firmament, dull and thick with snow, sailed up from the north and settled over expectant Europe, as we left off, before I started drugging my cat. Come on, it's nice. There it is. Toward afternoon began the descent. I feared no carriage would come. The white tempest raged so dense and wild. But trust my godmother. Once having asked, she would have her guest. About 6 o'clock, I was lifted from the carriage over the already blocked-up front steps of the chateau and put in at the door of La Terrasse. Come on, sweetie. Come on. Come on. You gonna come sit? You gonna come see the people? Kiss. Oh, come see the people? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's hard to figure out her thought processes because she's so inbred, and when she's on catnip, it's even harder. Running through the vestibule and upstairs to the drawing room, there I found Mrs. Bretton, a summer day in her own person. Had I been twice as cold as I was, her kind kiss and cordial clasp would have warmed me. Inured now for so long a time to rooms with bare boards, black benches, desks, and stoves, the blue saloon seemed to me gorgeous. In its Christmas-like fire alone, there was a clear and crimson splendour which quite dazzled me. Oh yeah, Dr. John is her godbrother. That's not a relationship that exists, apparently, but yeah, it's all very interconnected. When my godmother had held my hand for a little while and chatted with me, and scolded me for having become thinner than when she last saw me, she professed to discover that the snow wind had disordered my hair and sent me upstairs to make it neat and remove my shawl. Repairing to my own little sea-green room, Lucy used to stay with the Bretons during winter break when she was sick. She stayed with them for ages, so she's got her own room. Repairing to my own little sea-green room, there also I found a bright fire, and candles too were lit. A tall wax light stood on each side the great looking-glass, but between the candles and before the glass appeared something dressing itself, an airy, fairy thing, small, slight, white, a winter spirit. I declare for one moment I thought of Graham and his spectral illusions. With distrustful eye I noted the details of this new vision. It wore white, sprinkled slightly with drops of scarlet. Its girdle was red. It had something in its hair leafy yet shining, a little wreath with an evergreen gloss. Spectral or not, here truly was nothing frightful, and I advanced. Oh, good night. Good night, good night. Thank you for being here. Turning quick upon me, a large eye under long lashes flashed on me, the intruder. The lashes were as dark as long, and they softened with their penciling the orb they guarded. I hate when people call eyes orbs. It's the worst. Ghosts. Ghosts. Ah, you are come, she breathed out in a soft, quiet voice, and she smiled slowly and gazed intently. I'm going to try not to do a stupid voice to her, but I can't help it. I knew her now. Having only once seen that sort of face, with that cast of fine and delicate featuring, I could not but know her. Miss de Bassompierre, I pronounced. No, was the reply. Not Miss de Bassompierre for you. I did not inquire who then she might be, but waited voluntary information. You are changed, but still you are yourself, she said, approaching nearer. I remember you well, your countenance, the colour of your hair, the outline of your face. I had moved to the fire, and she stood opposite, and gazed into me. And as she gazed, her face became gradually more and more expressive of thought and feeling, till at last a dimness quenched her clear vision. It makes me almost cry to look back, said she. But as to being sorry or sentimental, don't think it. On the contrary, I am quite pleased and glad. Interested, yet altogether at fault, I knew not what to say. At last I stammered, I think I never met you till that night some weeks ago when you were hurt. She smiled. You have forgotten then that I have sat upon your knee, been lifted in your arms, even shared your pillow? You no longer remember the night when I came crying, like a naughty little child as I was, to your bedside, and you took me in? You have no memory for the comfort and protection by which you soothed an acute distress? Go back to Breton. Remember Mr. Home. This is from like the first few chapters. I would not blame you if you forgot it. Everyone has by this point of the book. At last I saw it all. And you are little Polly. Oh, she shared her pillow, but it was when she was a little kid, like 6. So, I am Paulina Mary Home de Bassompierre, and I am a very, very boring character. I am a pointless thing. How time can change. Little Polly wore in her pale, small features, her fairy symmetry, her varying expression, a certain promise of interest and grace. But Paulina Mary was become beautiful, not with the beauty that strikes the eye like a rose, orbed, ruddy, and replete, not with the plump and pink and flaxen attributes of her blonde cousin Ginevra, but her 17 years had brought her a refined and tender charm which did not lie in complexion, though hers was fair and clear, nor in outline, though her features were sweet and her limbs perfectly turned, but, I think, rather in a subdued glow from the soul outward. This was not an opaque vase, of material however costly, but a lamp chastely lucent, guarding from extinction, yet not hiding from worship, a flame vital and vestal. And speaking of her attractions, I would not exaggerate language, but indeed they seemed to me very real and engaging. What though all was on a small scale? It was the perfume which gave this white violet distinction, and made it superior to the broadest camellia, the fullest dahlia that ever bloomed. You got to remember that at this time, being thin was not attractive. Being short and thin, not a great thing. Ginevra Fanshawe was more the ideal. So Lucy has to actually get into detail about, even though Polly is of perfect proportions for our period, for her own, she was beautiful despite all of that. Yeah, Ginevra Fanshawe is dummy thick. Absolutely. Ah, and you remember the old time at Breton? Better, said she, better perhaps than you. I remember it with minute distinctness. Not only the time, but the days of the time, and the hours of the days. You must have forgotten some things. Very little, I imagine. You were then a little creature of quick feelings. You must, long ere this, have outgrown the impressions with which joy and grief, affection and bereavement stamped your mind 10 years ago. You think I have forgotten whom I liked, and in what degree I liked them when a child. The sharpness must be gone, the point, the poignancy, the deep imprint must be softened away and effaced. I have a good memory for those days. She looked as if she had. Her eyes were the eyes of one who can remember, one whose childhood does not fade like a dream, nor whose youth vanish like a sunbeam. She would not take life loosely and incoherently in parts, and let one season slip as she entered on another. She would retain and add, often review from the commencement, and so grow in harmony and consistency as she grew in years. I mean, I prefer to be completely slapdash and led by whims and horror, but, to each their own. Still, I could not quite admit the conviction that all the pictures which now crowded upon me were vivid and visible to her. Her fond attachments, her sports and contests with a well-loved playmate, the patient, true devotion of her child's heart, her fears, her delicate reserves, her little trials, the last piercing pain of separation. I retraced those things and shook my head, incredulous. She persisted. The child of 7 years lives yet in the girl of 17, said she. You used to be excessively fond of Mrs. Breton, I remarked, intending to test her. She set me right at once. Not excessively fond, said she. I liked her. I respected her as I should now. She seems to me very little altered. She is not much changed, I assented. We were silent a few minutes. Glancing round the room, she said, "There are several things here that used to be at Breton. I remember that pincushion and that looking glass." Evidently, she was not deceived in her estimate of her own memory. Not at least, so far. "You think, then, you would have known Mrs. Breton?" I went on. I perfectly remembered her. The turn of her features, her olive complexion and black hair, her height, her walk, her voice. Dr. Breton, of course, I pursued, would be out of the question. And indeed, as I saw your first interview with him, I am aware that he appeared to you as a stranger. That first night I was puzzled, she answered. How did recognition between him and your father come about? They exchanged cards. The names Graham Breton and Home de Bassompierre gave rise to questions and explanations. That was on the second day, but before then I was beginning to know something. How know something? Why, she said, how strange it is that most people seem so slow to feel the truth. Not to see, but to feel. When Dr. Breton had visited me a few times, and sat near and talked to me, when I had observed the look in his eyes, the expression about his mouth, the form of his chin, the carriage of his head, and all that we do observe in persons who approach us, how could I avoid being led by association to think of Graham Breton? Graham was slighter than he, and not grown so tall, and had a smoother face, and longer and lighter hair, and spoke, not so deeply, more like a girl. But yet he is Graham, just as I am little Polly, or you are Lucy Snow. Oh, everyone's feeling the truth. Well, they should be, then they'd be a lot less sad, I think. Maybe. I thought the same, but I wondered to find my thoughts hers. There are certain things in which we so rarely meet with our double that it seems a miracle when that chance befalls. You and Graham were once playmates. And do you remember that? She questioned in her turn. No doubt he will remember it also, said I. I have not asked him. Few things would surprise me so much as to find that he did. I suppose his disposition is still gay and careless. No, it's Lucy's disposition that's very gay. Not careless. Was it so formerly? Did it so strike you? Do you thus remember him? I scarcely remember him in any other light. Sometimes he was studious, sometimes he was merry, but whether busy with his books or exploded, disposed for play, it was chiefly the books or game he thought of, not much heeding those with whom he read or amused himself. Yet to you he was partial. Partial to me? Oh no. He had other playmates, his schoolfellows. I was of little consequence to him, except on Sundays. Yes, he was kind on Sundays. I remember walking with him hand in hand to St. Mary's, and his finding the places in my prayer book, and how good and still he was on Sunday evenings. So mild for such a proud, lively boy, so patient with all my blunders in reading, and so wonderfully to be depended on, for he never spent those evenings from home. I had a constant fear that he would accept some invitation and forsake us, but he never did, nor seemed ever to wish to do it. Thus, of course, it can be no more. I suppose Sunday will now be Dr. Breton's dining out day. Children, come down, called Mrs. Breton from below. Paulina would still have lingered, but I inclined to descend. We went down. The end of the chapter. And a good place to end it. I'm going to tell you right now, and hope that it's not a spoiler of any kind, but I don't like Polly. I find Polly incredibly boring. I mean, that whole conversation was boring, right? Like, it just was. It is interesting, though, that Lucy always finds an opportunity to bring up Ginevra. Just unrelated situations. So, thanks for being here. Thank you, Josh, and the Cabal. And thank you, everyone who watches this in the future. Look after yourself, wash your hands, look after each other, and the end, no moral. Thanks. I'll see you tomorrow, probably. Maybe. See how we go. Okay, bye. Don't be vexed. Don't ever get vexed.